I stood in the polished marble lobby, clutching my faded handbag, my fingers curled tight around the worn leather as if it were the only solid thing left in the room. Above me, a chandelier spilled white light like judgment, and beneath it, I felt invisible. People moved past in tailored coats and polished shoes, their reflections sliding across the floor without ever landing on me. When I told the receptionist my grandson's name, she didn't even bother to hide her smile. It wasn't loud, it was worse than that. Soft, amused. Her eyes drifted right through me, as if I were a smudge on the glass instead of a person standing inches away. "Are you sure?" she asked, already typing something else, already done with me. A line began to form behind me. I could feel the weight of their stares pressing into my back as security approached, their hands hovering near my elbows, not touching yet, but close enough to warn me. "Ma'am, could you step aside?" one of them said, voice practiced, gentle in a way that meant final. Then I heard her. My daughter-in-law's voice echoed out from the elevator, sharp and clipped, slicing through the air. "There's no appointment," she said quickly. "I don't know why she's here." She didn't look at me when she spoke, not once. She kept her eyes on the receptionist, her mouth tight with embarrassment, as if I were a stain she hoped would fade if ignored. My knees began to tremble as she turned, finally facing me, and said it out loud. "She's confused," she told them. "She's senile." The word hit harder than any shove. Staff nodded. Someone whispered. I felt heat crawl up my neck as she added, "We warned her not to come unannounced." A phone appeared, lifted casually by someone in line. I saw myself reflected in the glass doors as security escorted me out. Small, bent, my face warped and stretched like something unrecognizable. As the doors turned, cold air rushed in, and with it her final words, tossed carelessly behind her. "We've moved on without you." Outside, I reached into my coat and felt the stiff edge of the birthday card I'd mailed weeks ago. Returned, unopened. I sat down on a concrete planter because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. Humiliation seeped into my bones like winter damp, slow and deep. I tasted metal in my mouth while laughter drifted faintly through the revolving door behind me, warm and untouched. I watched my breath fog the air and made a quiet promise only I could hear. This would be the last time anyone erased me so easily. I remembered raising my son alone after his father vanished, taking our savings and my trust with him. I remembered learning how to stretch a paycheck, how to smile through exhaustion, how to make a home out of stubbornness and love. I worked double shifts until my hands ached, until sleep felt like a luxury I couldn't afford, all to keep food on the table and pride intact. When my son married, I gave them my inheritance to help buy that very building, the one that had just spit me out onto the street. I told myself money was meant to help family grow. I spent years babysitting my grandson, my small home becoming his second cradle, my arms remembering the weight of him even after he grew too big to carry. I ignored the small insults as they crept in, the jokes about my age, the comments about me forgetting things. "You know how she is," they'd laugh. I sold my wedding ring when their business nearly collapsed, slipped it quietly into a pawn shop envelope to pay their legal fees. No one ever asked where the money came from. I remembered the night my son promised me I'd always have a place with them. I watched that promise fade as success hardened his voice and sharpened his smile. Invitations stopped coming. Family photos stopped including me. My name disappeared slowly, deliberately, like it had never mattered. I realized my kindness had trained them to overlook my strength. I carried the quiet grief of being useful only when needed. And through it all, I remembered my late husband teaching me how to read contracts line by line, how to never sign what you don't understand. I had never stopped learning, never stopped observing. I had been patient, not powerless. In my spare bedroom, I began sorting old files they assumed were lost, boxes of documents, yellowed but intact. I reread loan agreements signed decades ago, my name still inked clearly at the bottom, binding as ever. I noticed rushed signatures, corners cut, rules bent just enough to break later. I went to the bank and asked careful questions, smiling like a harmless grandmother. The clerk leaned closer, lowering her voice when she mentioned outstanding obligations. Something clicked into place. A spark of clarity burned away the last of my doubt. I overheard my son on a podcast laughing as he called himself self-made. I took screenshots of every public lie, every erased contribution. I attended a community meeting where their company sought a zoning exception, sat quietly as they dismissed legacy stakeholders like me as irrelevant. Anger hardened into something colder, more precise. I drafted letters I didn't send, practicing my resolve. I watched their confidence grow sloppy, reckless. They believed I had no teeth left. Then my phone rang late one night, a number I almost ignored. When I answered, an old colleague of my husband's spoke, his voice heavy with recognition. He told me he'd been hired as an external auditor for my son's company. He asked gently if I was aware of my legal leverage, of my unpaid interests. The room tilted as decades of silence aligned into power. He explained the violations, the hidden debts, the fragile house of cards they'd built on my patience. In that moment, I understood my humiliation wasn't an ending, it was an invitation. I authorized him to proceed. My voice didn't shake. I slept deeply that night, my dreams sharp and unafraid. I woke knowing the balance had shifted. I attended the company's anniversary gala in my best dress, unannounced. Cameras flashed as I walked in, unrecognized but unashamed. When the host called for founders and early supporters, I stepped onto the stage. "I'm the primary financier," I said calmly, "the one you forgot to thank." I watched my son's smile fracture under the lights. I presented documents proving ownership claims and unpaid loans. The auditor stepped forward, confirming regulatory breaches in front of everyone. Murmurs turned into gasps as investors checked the phones. I looked directly at my daughter-in-law, while security froze, unsure who to escort. I spoke about respect, about memory, about consequences. I announced the legal action already filed that morning. There was no joy in me, only release. Applause scattered uncertainly as I walked out alone, spine straight, my name restored. By morning, headlines had reframed me from confused grandmother to key stakeholder. Accounts were frozen, investigations opened. My son called again and again, his voice cracked with fear and regret. I didn't answer. Lawyers handled what emotions could not. I reclaimed my contributions with interest. I donated a portion to a community fund for older workers. Apologies arrived, handwritten and late. I reconnected with my grandson privately, setting boundaries I should have set years ago. I felt lighter, as if years of being unseen had lifted. I forgave myself for waiting so long to stand. Justice, I learned, didn't require cruelty, only truth. Now I sit at my kitchen table, sunlight warming the scars of memory. Silence, I know, is often mistaken for weakness, but patience can be a strategy, not a surrender. I share this for anyone dismissed because of age or kindness. Power doesn't always shout. Respect begins the moment you demand it. I no longer chase acknowledgement from those who erased me. If this story resonated, think about who you might be overlooking. Share it if you need to. And thank you for listening to a grandmother who was never powerless.